What's going on there, YouTube, and welcome back to another comic book video. This is the channel where we sit down and cover different comic book stories from different comic book companies. Today, we are going to jump back over to Marvel Comics and continue our coverage over the X-Men reading order. Now, we do pick up with Uncanny X-Men number 174 and 175. Now, with these two issues, we actually see the return of the Dark Phoenix. The Dark Phoenix is back once again to fight against the X-Men, and now the X-Men must find a way to actually stop their old friend once again, but to hopefully defeat her one and final time. And so I do hope you enjoy today's comic book video. And if you do, please hit the like button down below and subscribe. Also, if you have any suggestions on books I should read, well, please let me know in the comments below, because you never know, your suggestion could be a future video down the road. But I do hope you enjoy today's comic book video. To begin today's video, we actually pick up with Scott Summers and Madeline Pryor. Now, we do pick up with them in space, and the reason why, because they're hanging out with the Starjammers. Of course, the group that belongs to Corsair, the father of Cyclops. But right now, we're focusing on these two characters. And the reason why, because over the last couple videos, these two characters have become a couple, but they keep getting more serious each video. And so it seems like sooner or later, these two characters could possibly get married down the road. But either way, you do have Corsair kind of bring up what he did offer his son a long time ago. Corsair did ask Cyclops if he wants to leave Earth and join the Starjammers to be close with his father. And of course, Cyclops was thinking about going with his father in space. But now he has Madeline Pryor, he's kind of reconsidering that, because he wants to spend more time with the woman he loves. But we do jump over to Charles Xavier and Illyandra, where we pick up with Charles Xavier trying to learn how to walk again. Because at this point in Marvel Comics, Charles Xavier was given a clone body that gave him the ability to walk. But unfortunately, there are some difficulties when it comes to Charles Xavier being able to actually walk. But either way, you do have Illyandra bring up Madeline Pryor. And the reason why, because Madeline Pryor looks very similar to Jean Grey in almost every single aspect. Now, she does ask Charles Xavier, did he read the mind of Madeline Pryor to see that she could be Jean Grey just reborn? Of course, you do have Charles say he tried, but unfortunately, he was unable to read her mind. And that is very concerning. But of course, he is happy that Scott Summers was able to find someone to love once again. But we do jump over to Scott Summers and Madeline Pryor. And the reason why, because Madeline Pryor actually does bring up Jean Grey. And the reason why, because Scott Summers did show Madeline a picture of Jean Grey to show that they look very similar to one another. But on top of that, she knows that Cyclops really did love Jean Grey, but she died. And so for Madeline, she knows that she always going to battle for the heart of Scott Summers with Jean Grey, because how much Scott Summers actually loved Jean Grey. But this is the moment you do have Scott Summers actually ask Madeline Pryor, does she want to come with him in the Starjammers in space so that they can have the ability to be with one another? Now, we actually have to jump over to Japan and pick up with Wolverine. And the reason why, because in our last video, Wolverine was supposed to marry his long-term girlfriend Mariko, but at the very last second, she called off the wedding and said that he was not worthy to marry her. And so, of course, the wedding was off. And so he goes back to Japan, goes back to Mariko, and demands to have an answer on why in the world did she change change her mind, because after Wolverine had killed her father to free her clan, she gave him an honor sword to show that he's a very honorable man. But now here she is and saying that he is not worthy at all. And he wants answers, but of course, she does not give him answers at all. On top of that, she actually took in her evil half-brother, the Silver Samurai, who was actually trying to kill Mariko in the last video. And so Wolverine just leaves because he knows he's in a losing battle at the moment. Now, we actually do jump over to the school of Charles Xavier, where we actually focus on Kitty Pryde and Colossus, because at this point, Chris Claremont has been slowly bringing these two characters together as a couple. Like every single storyline, something happens where they kiss, they hug, they talk, but each time they get closer and closer to becoming a couple. And so this is the moment where you actually have Kitty Pryde show that she has learned how to control her powers even more, but on top of that, she does take Colossus up into the attic, which is the home of Storm actually. But either way, when they get into the attic, you do have Kitty Pryde actually kiss Colossus. And again, this happens a lot of times throughout Chris Claremont run, because he was trying to build that relationship between these two characters. But while the two of them were making out, of course, they were caught by Storm because they're in her room. Now, at the end of our last video, we actually saw Storm change her appearance because she's changing who she is inside and outside as well. And so with that being said, she also got rid of her plants because this is an all new Storm going in a new direction. Now, also, in the infirmary, we actually see Nightcrawler making sure that Rogue is okay, because in our last video, at the very last second, Rogue saved the life of Wolverine from the hands of Madame Hydra. And so right now, Nightcrawler, being the doctor of the team, is just making sure that Rogue is okay. But then we jump over to Scott Summers and Madeline Pryor, where we see right now the two of them are flying a plane for Scott Summers' grandparents' business. But while the two of them are flying that plane, we actually see on the hand of Madeline Pryor, Scott Summers had proposed to Madeline and she said yes. And so now the two of them are engaged. Now you do have Scott Summers go back and check on the rest of the passengers on the plane, but while he is walking around, well, that is when a random pastor says, "Hey man, you dropped this picture, I think it belongs to you." And of course, Scott Summers pick up the picture. Now here comes the problem though. That picture is a picture of Jean Grey. The problem is Scott Summers had no idea where in the world this picture came from. It should be somewhere else. On top of that, when Scott Summers walks away, we actually see that the old man is actually evil and he is plotting something down the road for Scott Summers and Madeline Pryor, and possibly the rest of the X-Men. But this begins one of the dumbest moves that Cyclops has ever done in comic book history. And the reason why I say that is because you do have Madeline and Scott Summers right now at their home relaxing, but Scott Summers asked Madeline Pryor one question, and the question was, is she Jean Grey? Is she the Phoenix just reborn? And of course, this makes Madeline Pryor so upset. But the reason why Scott Summers had to ask that question is because the same day Jean Grey died, Madeline Pryor was in a plane crash. But unfortunately for Madeline Pryor, she was the only person to survive that plane crash. So right at the same time Jean Grey died, Madeline was able to survive a random plane crash, but the only one to survive. And so to Scott Summers, he's kind of like, you look like her, that plane crash happened the same time she died, you have to be the Phoenix, just the Phoenix reborn. And so you have Madeline run off. And when Scott Summers tries to go after her, well, that is when he's hit with some kind of energy. And then out of the shadows, we actually see the return of the Dark Phoenix. And it's kind of like, wait a second, is Madeline Pryor the Phoenix? But then we jump over to Uncanny X-Men number 175, where we actually pick up with the rest of the Uncanny X-Men right now outside, spending time with one another. But while they're doing that, that is when they see the random moment the Phoenix appears right in front of them. Now, I do want to point out real quick, when it comes to Rogue, she had never met the Phoenix before, so she has no idea how powerful the Phoenix can truly be. And so with Rogue seeing the Phoenix, she's kind of like, okay, y'all warned me about her, and now she is here. What in the world can we do to actually stop her? But the Phoenix is gone just like that. But with the Phoenix being gone, well, that is when they see that Scott Summers is falling from the sky. The Phoenix has Scott Summers, and now she let him go to fall to his death. Luckily, Rogue and Storm were there to capture him. But when they do catch him, well, that is when you have Charles Xavier say, I need y'all to come here to me right now, because if Jean Grey's back as the Phoenix, this could be a huge problem. Now, when the X-Men are able to meet up with Charles Xavier, you do have Scott Summers tell Charles Xavier that he believes that Madeline Pryor is the Dark Phoenix reborn, because he tells Charles, hey, when I asked her if she was Jean Grey, the Dark Phoenix reborn, she slapped me, she walked away, and then a moment later, she came back as the Dark Phoenix. And so right now, the X-Men believe that Madeline Pryor is the Dark Phoenix. Now, this is when you have Charles Xavier decide to use Cerebro to hopefully detect Jean Grey's mind nearby. But when he tried that, of course, that is when a huge feedback hits the mind of Charles Xavier, knocking him out. And so now the X-Men don't have Charles Xavier to help them deal with the Dark Phoenix problem. But you didn't have Wolverine ask Kitty Pryde to look over Cerebro. And the reason why, because Wolverine remembers that Charles made sure to add in some kind of defense system as a way to block those feedbacks from hitting his mind. But that is when you have Kitty Pryde tell Wolverine those defense systems were actually turned off. And the question is, who turned them off? But that is when you have the Phoenix reappear, because she came out the body of Scott Summers. Now, with the Phoenix being here, the X-Men know they do not stand a chance against her, because how powerful the Dark Phoenix truly is. But of course, the X-Men do not have a choice here. They have to actually stop her. And so you have every single X-Men member except Wolverine and Cyclops. One, because Cyclops is knocked out, and Wolverine realized there is no way we can actually beat her. So why in the world should I try to fight her and get my butt kicked as well? But once she's able to actually beat all of the X-Men, well, that is the moment you do have the Dark Phoenix leave. But that is when you have Storm realize they need all the help they can get to actually stop Jean Grey. And so that is the moment you actually have Storm call in Corsair and the Star Jammers. The problem is, when she calls them, they've been attacked by the Phoenix. And the problem is, the next second in the phone call, while Corsair is telling the X-Men that they have been attacked, the Phoenix kills the Star Jammers and Corsair. Just like that. They were blown up. And so you didn't have Storm freak out, but then she realized that she can call the Avengers. And when she calls the Avengers, well, Steve Rogers does answer. He's like, yeah, I'm down to help out. Just tell me everything I need to know. Well, the problem is, the next second, all of Manhattan is blown up by the Phoenix. And so it seems like the Phoenix is going on a rampage, and the X-Men truly can't do anything about it. And right now, it seems like they're gonna die sooner or later. Now, we actually get this very weird moment where we see Scott Summers' soul leaving his body, and it seems like that Scott Summers could possibly be going into the afterlife. But when he's about to enter into the afterlife, well, that is when he is greeted by some random woman. Now, of course, we have no idea who this woman is, but she tells him like, hey, listen, you are not supposed to be here at all at this moment. You're supposed to come later on. But also, do not believe what you're seeing right now. Believe your heart, and your heart can tell you what is really going on. And this person does send Scott Summers' soul back into his body. Now, when Scott Summers' soul goes back into his body, well, that is the moment he realized what in the world is going on here. Because some of the injuries that he had received from the Dark Phoenix is already gone. And he said, there's no way my injuries should be gone already. I don't have any kind of healing factor. And so that is when he realized that the X-Men have not been fighting against the Dark Phoenix. They're fighting against somebody else who is out to get revenge against the X-Men. Somebody who is able to play mind games with the X-Men, making them believe that the Dark Phoenix is actually back, but in reality, the Dark Phoenix is not back at all. And so you do have Scott Summers try to tell the rest of the X-Men what he just learned. But the problem is, when he goes to see the other X-Men, they all believe that he is the Dark Phoenix, because right now, whoever is behind all of this is making the X-Men believe that Scott Summers is actually the Dark Phoenix. And so you have Scott Summers right now trying to get away from the X-Men so that he can find a way to show them, like, hey, we're being tricked. We're being played around right now. Somebody else is behind all of this and they're trying to kill us. We need to stop this right now and work together. Now, we do learn who is behind all of this. Of course, it is Jason Wingard, aka Mastermind. Now, when it comes to Jason Wingard, he has the ability to play with the minds of other people by using the 5 senses against them. So, of course, see, taste, feel, hear, and smell. He is able to take those 5 senses and use them against someone else to make them believe something totally different is going on. And so right now for the X-Men, they see Jean Grey, but in reality, she is not there. They hear her voice, but of course, she is not there. They feel her attack, but of course, it's him making them believe that Jean Grey is actually attacking them and they're getting hurt. But of course, there are no real injuries on them at all. It's Jason Wingard just playing with the minds of the X-Men. Now, we do learn it is him because right now he is holding Madeline Pryor as a hostage because 1, she looks very similar to Jean Grey, but 2, because she has close ties to the X-Men, thanks to Scott Summers, her fiance. But either way, the last time we saw Jason Wingard was actually in the Dark Phoenix saga, when he was trying to use his powers as a way to control the mind of Jean Grey to make Jean Grey help out the Hellfire Club. Of course, that did backfire, and Jean Grey, aka the Dark Phoenix, was very upset, and so she fried his mind. But of course, his mind was fixed, and now he is back here to get revenge against the X-Men. Now, honestly, Mastermind does get defeated very easily. What I mean is, you do have Scott Summers continue to fight against the X-Men, trying to convince them that he is not the Dark Phoenix, and right now their minds are being played with. But once he's able to actually do that, to show them like, hey, I am Scott Summers, I am not the Dark Phoenix. We're all being played at right now. We need to work together to go after Mastermind. The X-Men realize, oh yeah, that is Scott Summers. And so you do have Storm being able to create a small storm in the room that they are in. But with her doing that, of course, it was able to knock out Mastermind. And that is when the X-Men realized, yep, Scott Summers was right. Mastermind was back here again, trying to get revenge because Jean Grey fried his mind, but luckily we were able to stop him. On top of that, Madeline Pryor is okay, and so her and Scott Summers can continue to date one another once again. But the story is not done yet because there is still one more thing left to happen in this book. Of course, it is a very special moment and a big moment in X-Men history. And the reason why I say that is because you have all the old and new X-Men coming together for this big moment. And of course, this big moment is the wedding of Scott Summers and Madeline Pryor. And they actually do get married. And so, at the very end of this book, Scott Summers now has a wife. And that wife is Madeline Pryor. And this is where we are going to end today's comic book video. So please hit the like button down below and subscribe. Also, if you have any suggestions on books I should read, well, please let me know in the comments below, because you never know, your suggestion could be a future video down the road. But I do hope you enjoy today's comic book video.